Stacy's Reflections from the Farm.
Welcome to Reflections from the Farm Story Time. Today's story is entitled A Chicken Story. Chapter 1, Arrival. She arrived with her 14 sisters in a medium-sized cardboard box. Stacy excitedly picked up the box at her local co-op and carefully secured the box in the front seat of her car. Stacy kept a protective hand on her precious cargo and talked to them all the way home. Home, because the chicken coop had yet to be finished, ended up being a large rubber feed trough in the middle of Stacy's plant room. There was a warm heat light, fresh shavings, and plenty of food and water. Several times a day, the baby chick's home was cleaned, and everyone was picked up and cuddled so they understood that Stacy was the mom. Stacy named her Bess, and she would become a beautiful blue-black Australorp chicken. Chapter 2, The Chicken Palace. Just as Bess and her sisters began to outgrow their feed trough, the chicken coop, or chicken palace, as Stacy's husband liked to call it, was finished. Bess's flock was moved into the timeout room of the coop, a mid-sized walled and screened space with a big window. The growing chickens had space to roam, a small-sized roost, heat lamp, and area for food and water. However, it wasn't long before Bess had grown adult feathers along with her sisters and could be let out into the larger coop with the taller, larger roosts and nesting boxes. The final transition was unlocking the little door that opened to a huge outdoor screened chicken run, with boxes filled with grass, logs and a ladder to climb on, and even a chicken swing. Bess and her flock were living in paradise. Then a miracle happened. Bess and her sisters started to lay eggs. Chapter 3, Becoming Broody. One early spring day, Stacy went to the coop to find Bess all alone, sitting in a nest box. Stacy stroked Bess's pretty head as she reached under her and found 4 eggs. After removing the eggs, Stacy tried to gently push Bess out of the box. Bess made an odd chirp and wouldn't budge. Bess was broody. This meant all she wanted to do was sit on eggs. She wouldn't even eat or drink. After several days of Stacy not successfully removing Bess from the box, Stacy resorted to drastic measures. She consulted Dr. Google. Bess was sent to the timeout room for a period of time, only to return to the box. She was dunked in cool water, which made her ornery, and she still returned to the box. Finally, Stacy gave up and just started feeding and watering Bess in her nest box. Consequently, Bess got a new name, Broody Bess. Chapter 4, A Bloody Mess. Several years later, Stacy was alarmed to enter the chicken coop to find a bloody mess. Several of the chickens had blood all over their legs, and they obviously were in pain. They didn't have parasites or disease, so it was quite confusing as to how this happened. Stacy gently treated them, and they remained in the timeout room until they were healed. This puzzling phenomenon happened several times with different chickens. Then, right after several healed chickens were released back into the flock, the answer was known. Broody Bess promptly began attacking their legs again and causing significant damage. Stacy was furious and attempted to catch Bess. Chapter 5, The Chase. It didn't take long before Stacy realized that Broody Bess was much faster than her. So Stacy called for Todd to help. Together, after some discussion on how this should be done, they cornered Bess. Todd took a flying lunge at Bess, only to rip out the back end of his jeans and come up empty-handed. Now Todd was furious. He went to get the huge bug net, and Tess was quickly caught in the net and abruptly dumped into the inner pasture. Bess was now a free-range chicken with all of its risks and dangers. Chapter 6, First Exile. This was a lonely, quiet time on the farm. There were no horses, llamas, or other goats, only poor Emma, alone in the red barn. Broody Bess initially stayed by the chickens on the outside of the run. Stacy provided her with food and water. When it became dusk, Stacy found Bess roosted on a fence post. She gently removed her and placed her on a shelf in the red barn. Broody Bess quickly thrived outside and became Emma's best friend. They would greet Stacy each morning looking for their breakfast. As fall started to usher in colder weather, Stacy became concerned if Bess could survive in the colder red barn. Then one morning when Stacy was feeding the chickens, Broody Bess darted into the coop to rejoin her feathered friends. They warmly welcomed her back into the flock. Everyone got along well all through the winter. Chapter 7, Second Exile. Early this past spring, Stacy found Broody Bess stumbling around the coop looking sick. She was shocked to realize that Bess's beautiful comb was bloody and damaged, plus one of her eyes had been injured. Bess was a victim of her siblings' violent pecking. Broody Bess was again exiled to outside the chicken coop, and this time Stacy wasn't sure she would pull through. Chickens are resilient, and even though Bess looked like a unicorn with her disfigured comb, she became a healthy and an active member of a new herd. She loved grazing with the new goats, enjoyed eating out of the llama's food dishes, and relished the horse barn, as she liked to scratch in their bedding and dismantle their poop piles. She now had a special feed tray in the horse barn just outside of everyone's reach. That is, except for the barn chipmunk, with whom she graciously shared her food. Late in the summer, Stacy noticed Broody Bess couldn't fly up to roost in the barn. As she picked Bess up, Stacy noticed a hard mass under her wing. Several weeks later, Bess was found slumped in the pasture. Stacy had the privilege to gently hold Broody Bess as she took her last breath. Todd and Stacy buried Bess next to her other siblings in the pasture right outside the chicken run. Everyone came to say goodbye. The goats sniffed at Bess and then had to check out to see that her grave was dug properly. The llamas supervised, and the mini horse and donkey watched from behind their fence. All of Broody Bess's siblings lined up single file around the inside of the chicken run to watch Bess be laid to rest. They had done this every time each of the 6 previous chickens had been buried. Stacy again realized that stupid animals often react more human than humans. The end. Bess reminded me that we all have a light and a dark or shadow side. Bess's shadow side was when she decided, for whatever reason, to peck the other chicken's legs. For us, our shadow side may be that childlike, whiny, complaining, depressed part of ourselves. Or it may be the angry, judgmental, argumentative, or maybe even manipulative and abusive or violent side of us. It could be the scared, worried, or anxious side of us. But all of those things are part of our shadows, which we at times are shocked. We want to deny. We don't want people to see that. But what happens is that we need to acknowledge and take responsibility for our shadow sides. As we all know, there is no situation or person that can make us angry. Many theologians say that when we acknowledge our shadow sides and take a look at that, that's where we meet God. I think that by looking at that, that's where I realize I need God. I thank God for Bess and her life and how it's impacted mine. Thank you for being with me today, and I look forward to seeing you again.